Today on Locked On Red Wings, McKeen's ranks Detroit's prospect pool number one in the NHL. What makes that the case?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm formerly a broadcast producer for 97.1 The Ticket, where Scotty is the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Scotty, happy Thursday. How are you doing, buddy?
Doing well, man. Doing well. I getting prepared for the Detroit Grand Prix this weekend, happening basically right outside my apartment. Pretty cool. So.
Are you writing for it, or are you just like preparing?
No, I'm just going as a fan. Got some friends coming into town for it. It'll be a fun weekend. So
sounds like fun, dude.
What about you?
I'm okay. You know, just living life, just vibing.
Super not convincing, but okay.
I'm just vibing, man. Just living life.
That's good, man.
Yeah. So on today's episode, we are like, I'm gonna be real with you guys. We're like a week late to this news about the McKeen's hockey thing. I think we talked about it briefly last week.
To talk about those.
Yeah, but that's exactly it. Like we've had guests on, and with the Griffins playing, it's kind of been on our
green type of thing.
Right, it's on the back burner, and this list isn't going to change until June 28th. So we figured once we have a free day, we'll break it down. And today is that free day. On May 21st, I'm sure by now all of you have seen it, McKeen's, in an attempt to tease their prospect pool rankings breakdown, because they'll have an article for every team. And just yesterday, by the time you're listening to this, they had a full article on teams 32 through 30. They let everyone know right off the get-go that the Detroit Red Wings come in with the top-rated prospect pool in the NHL. So we're going to talk about that today, what we agree with, what we don't agree with, who we felt maybe left off, and maybe as to why. Because, again, they haven't broken down why the Red Wings are number one yet. So we can still speculate a little bit about some of the criteria that they maybe have, and we'll even speculate about what makes Detroit number one and what maybe they still lack. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'll even share and put it up on the screen for you guys. And leading us off, number one on the Detroit Red Wings prospect rankings is going to come to as no surprise to almost any of you, Simon Edvinsson. Scotty, there's not really much to break down. I mean, he's borderline not even a prospect anymore with how much service time he's had in the NHL. It feels like at the end, maybe it feels like, actually, as I say that, it feels like he played more than he really did at the end of the season, just because of how much they leaned on him too, with Wallman injured. But yeah, I mean, he's trending towards not even being a prospect anymore.
Yeah, and that's why he's number one. And even if he didn't have a single game of NHL experience, he would still be number one. This is a guy that has been the bona fide top prospect in this system pretty much, I'm trying to think, pretty much ever since Sider and Raymond graduated. No? Has there been anybody else at the top since the two of them left the minor league rankings? I'm pretty sure he's been the pretty clear-cut number one for that entire era, unless I'm just being stupid and blatantly forgetting someone, which is totally possible. But regardless, like this is somebody that on draft night people were really excited about, and now years later is somebody that people are excited about all over again at the NHL level. And I think the presumption is he can be a bona fide top pair caliber talent. It's just a matter of whether they are going to put him and Sider together or whether they're going to kind of spread out the wealth. But if he, the hope is that the talent level will be kind of top pair defensemen. And we're really excited to finally kind of take the leash off, right? Take the training wheels off and kind of truly see what he's got in a full season this fall.
Correct. He's played a grand total of 25 NHL games across 2 seasons, 9 his first season and 16 this past one, where he had 1 point or 2 points, 1 goal and 1 assist. in the 16 games he played in 23-24. He looked really good. This is the final year he's going to be on this rankings.
Yeah.
And he's carrying a lot of weight. After that, it goes number 2, Nate Danielson. Number 3, Marco Kasper. Number 4, Axel Sandin Pellica. Number 5, Sebastian Kosa. Number 6, Trey Augustine. 7, Carter Mazer. William Wallander at number 8. Shai Buim at number 9. And at number 10, Dmitry Buchelnikov. Now, Scotty, when you look at this top 10 ranking, what is your instant reaction? Does anyone stand out to you as a surprise? Like, does anyone do you see anyone on this list? Let me put it this way. Do you see anyone on this list at first blush that you maybe are surprised is on the list for the top 10 in your eyes?
Honestly, no. We'll get to a portion later on when we talk about notable omissions, and I think that there is certainly one, like fairly obvious one, but probably a couple names we can throw out there on the omissions list. But I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is 9 and 10. Like just from again, there are. I don't want to jump the gun, but like there are some like bigger names I feel like that are not on this list. And like Shai Buim, goodness, is a guy who like this season gained a lot of traction and somebody that a lot of people in this fan base are have gotten a lot more excited about. And I don't disagree with anyone being on here. I'm not like, wow, that person should like not be in the top 10 or anything like that. It's, if anything, it's like cool. Is that good analysis? It's cool to see like guys like that on here. I think the biggest things that jump out to me, and I want to give you a chance to answer your own question there first, but I think the biggest thing that jumps out to me more than anything is a couple of the names just being ahead of other names that are also on this list. I think the ranking specifically, maybe I have some not questions, but there's definitely some that jump out in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I think they pretty much nailed the top 10 Red Wings prospects. We can talk about omissions and maybe reasons why they're not on, who we think should maybe be on here is not on here. But overall, like it's really just order. And that's splitting hairs, in my opinion, right? Like, there's no question about Edvinsson. We've already broken that down. I have questions about putting Nate Danielson above Marco Kasper just because Danielson,
that's the big one to start for sure.
Danielson had a great season, but he was playing in the WHL, whereas Marco Kasper is playing professional hockey with Grand Rapids Griffins. So yeah, their production was different, but they were playing in completely different leagues. Marco Kasper was playing with men.
Well, that's why it's hard to compare it as well, right? Yeah.
So, like, personally, I would have put Kasper ahead of Nate Danielson, but, like, if you want to put Danielson ahead of Kasper, I'm not going to fight anyone for it. Like, that I'm fine with.
Yeah, it's also, is this how good are they now or how high their ceiling is, right? Like, how high their ceiling is right. If it's strictly a ranking of ceiling, then honestly, what league they're in right now shouldn't matter too terribly much, right?
Correct.
If the belief is Danielson has a higher ceiling than Kasper, then that's the belief. So I do think that is one of there's probably like 3 kind of order questions that I have, and I think that's the pretty obvious big one is, who do you have, who should be higher, Danielson or Kasper? I agree with you. I think we're really splitting hairs, and
exactly.
And I think that, no matter which side of the aisle you fall on, you probably have a legitimate argument of being right. But I do think that that's one where a lot of people would have Kasper still ahead. I cannot talk. Ahead of Danielson.
Neither can I. No, and like you said, if it's based on ceilings and they feel that Danielson has a higher ceiling, I don't necessarily know if I disagree with that. So that's fine. Again, it's splitting hairs. I don't really care to argue too much about it. Axel Sandin Pellica, I love that at 4. He exploded on the scene in the SHL this season. He's going to go back. He's going to get even better and be more dominant next year. I love Sebastian Kosa at 5. He's really proved this year that he can play professional level hockey, right? Started out slow just like the year prior and then finished the season with like a 9-15. Was very good in the playoffs as well. Saved 2 games in the playoffs where he didn't have great games. The other 7 he played were fantastic. I am a little surprised by how high Trey Augustine already is on here. I'm not against it. Again, if it's based on ceiling, I'm high on Augustine too. I'm shocked that he's number 6. I would put him in the top 10. Mazer, I'm fine with at 7. William Wallander, I'm a little shocked at. I was underwhelmed by the season he had in Grand Rapids. Outside the one game where he had a goal and an assist in the playoffs in game 3 or 4 of the series against the Admirals, I felt like he was kind of forgettable on the ice. But if it's based on ceilings, obviously as a puck moving, offensive zone creating defenseman, there's still a lot to love. And boo him, yeah, I'm cool with that. Like he really is. He's been so solid in Denver. I think he's been gonna have a great career next year at Grand Rapids. The last one that really kind of surprises me, Dmitry Buchnilikov. This is a guy that's been flying under my radar like the entire time of his development, just solely because he plays over in Russia. And he's a speedy offense first winger who scores highlight reel goals. He played on loan, but he played like 55 games in the KHL this season, his first full season in the KHL. He had 29 points. He really took a step forward in his development this year. So I'm a little shocked he's at 10, just based on maybe some of the omissions and guys who have playing in Grand Rapids, but I'm not against it either. I think that and again, if we're talking about ceiling, does have a very high ceiling, but when talking about the floor, I'm not sure if the floor is NHL caliber either. So, but I'm not going to know for sure until I see more of him, and I'm not going to see more of him until he's over in North America.
Right. No, for sure. That's totally fair.
Yeah. So we're going to go to a quick break unless you have anything else to add real quick. I know I kind of just shotgunned down the list.
I have a couple again of the individual orders that jump out at me, but we'll get into it after break. I don't want to have a 15-minute first break.
Right. I don't think Sean would appreciate that. So we're going to go to our first break, and when we return, we're going to talk about anyone we feel maybe left off and reasons as to why, as well as what makes this prospect list number 1 for the Detroit Red Wings in the NHL. Stay tuned to segment 2 of Lockdown Red Wings. Game Time has been making NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier to get. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, and that's true with any of the sports that they support, which, by the way, is NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB. Scotty himself has taken advantage of those last-minute ticket deals because he lives just, a 20-minute walk from Comerica Park. So you get an inning in, you see they maybe put a couple of runs up on the boards, you go, okay, maybe this game's actually worth watching in person. So then he takes advantage, and then the prices are already lower because the game's already started. Those last-minute deals save him up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. And you save even more with a flat exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event with those flash deals. And zone deals even save more money when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy with those in-app seat views. And the lowest price guarantee means they'll credit 110% of the difference if you find the same tickets on a different app for less. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I was waiting for you to say, indeed you do, because I'm just so used to it, even though it's not Indeed day. So segment 2, Lockdown Red Wings podcast. Scotty, the next question we have in terms of this list is, do you feel like there's anyone who was omitted from this list? And then let's talk about as to why. Also, if you have anything to respond to me shotgunning the list, of course, you can still address that.
No, well, I think I want to start. The emissions conversation, I think, is a really big one, and that's a pretty obvious transition here, but I do want to just point out, I think that ASP over Kosa is a take. Like I'm not saying it's wrong, but I do think that that's a little bit out on a limb. Not that, again, ASP has obviously a really high ceiling and we all have really high hopes for him. But I do think that, when Kosa was drafted, and I'm not sure it's really wavered, like the expectation internally, I shouldn't say internally. Steve Yzerman and I don't talk, but the expectation within the fan base, at least, has been like this dude's going to take over and be the 1A down the road, right? And to further my point, if I asked you or anybody listening, if Kosa doesn't turn into like the bona fide starting goalie for this hockey team down the road at some point in his career, is that a failure? I feel like most people are going to say yes, whereas ASP, I feel like he's a second line, like solid puck moving second pair, kind of puck moving defenseman, that people would take that. And maybe that has more to do with, like we have Moritz Seider, so like we don't necessarily need a ton of just like top pair caliber guys. But like I do feel like that. I'm not even saying I disagree with it. I might have ASP ahead of Kosa as well. I'm just saying that that one really jumped out at me as like I think there's kind of an argument to switch those.
Yeah, it doesn't really bother me too much because, again, it just feels like that splitting hairs conversation, right? You could just easily alternate guys between a couple different things. It's not that big a deal. I see what you mean, though. So, like Sebastian Kosa, we're talking about ceilings versus the two of them. We expect Kosa to have that number one goalie ceiling in the NHL, where Axel Sandin Pelka, I can't talk either this evening. Oh, maybe, like you said, second pair, power play merchant type guy. But it is what it is. Now, when it comes to guys who are left off the list, I think the one who stands out the most, Scotty, is Albert Johansson. He's the one who I was thinking about.
For sure. Going into it, I kind of alluded to, like, there's one pretty clear omission. It's kind of like the biggest name not on here. There's a few that I'm sure we'll talk about, but I think pretty comfortably, honestly, the biggest one is Johansson. Yeah.
And if I'm being honest, like after thinking about it and thinking on it, I think the main reason why Albert Johansson is not on the list might be the same reason somebody like Jonathan Berggren might not be on this list. And that's because their entry-level contracts are up. They're about to sign their first
played
67 games.
Right. No, I get your point, though.
But yeah, their entry-level contracts are over. And with Albert Johansson, it was a 4-year entry-level contract because the first year slid. He had that entry-level slide kick in. So they're no longer prospects because they're no longer on ELCs. Like they're going to get their first big boy contract in the NHL. So that may have disqualified them, despite the fact that Simon Edvinsson has played 25 more NHL games than somebody like Albert Johansson, because their entry-level contracts are out. That may have disqualified them, because if not, I see no reason why Albert Johansson would not be on this list above William Wallander, for instance. William Wallander, who still has that ceiling, but didn't wow me that much. Albert Johansson looks like an NHL caliber defenseman, even if the ceiling isn't as high as somebody like William Wallander's, right? Like, I feel Albert Johansson, at the very least, at the very minimum, is an Oli Mata type defenseman, in that, like, not to say their styles are one for one, but in usage, right? Third pair defenseman, very safe, you know what you're getting out of them type guy, rather than, your offensive zone guy that's, your Shane Gostisbehere types, as opposed to that. So when it comes to Albert Johansson, that's why I'm thinking maybe he got left off, because if that's not the reason, I would find it hard to believe he's not higher than, William Wallander at this point, at least personally. But again, it's split in hairs. He's the main one. Again, I think Berggren's just left off because of his age. He's 23 years old, 2018
Yeah, also,
draft
again,
pick,
Berggren's played 60-something games in the NHL.
Right. I was slightly surprised no Tuomisto, but again, I think when we're talking ceilings, Buchnolikov and Buin might have higher ceilings, more exciting ceilings than Tuomisto. But Tuomisto, by all means, I still think can be an NHL caliber player.
Yeah, I would agree. Anybody else?
In terms of omissions, the Red Wings have a ton of, second round picks that you could maybe make an argument on the fringe side of things, but I don't really have an issue with the rest of this list.
Yeah, I don't either.
It's a great list.
To your opinion, I know that we were really pumping the tires on this guy last year because he was dominating the league he was in, and then this year, got a little bit of a promotion to a higher level, and we didn't see that, even close to that level of production. If you did this a year ago, do you think Amadeus Lombardi is 10?
That's a good question. I
guess my question, even if you don't want to get that specific and would Lombardi have been ranked, just straight up I don't want to say have people soured on him. He's still very young. This was his first test of truly, kind of higher end professional hockey. I'm sure his role will increase slightly next season, and they'll try to kind of get his development back on track. But there was just so much hype around him because of the ridiculous production he had in Flint. And then when, this year in Grand Rapids just didn't really have a ton of opportunity just in general. It's not like he was getting, top 6 minutes or anything, but We didn't really see that carry over. So I'm curious if the fan base in general has, again, I don't want to use the word soured. I'm trying to think of any other word to
Yeah, I
describe
mean,
this.
he's 20 years old.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Soured is not fair at all, and also not what I'm trying to articulate. But is this just a situation where, like, okay, like we, because of the production, we got all really hype, and now that it's going to take time to adjust, maybe we're going to get quieter and be less rowdy about it, and then hopefully when he adjusts and starts producing again, maybe he'll go back up. I don't know, but it's just interesting for somebody who was in a lot of headlines when it came to prospects this time last year because of what he did in Flint. Seeing him not even really a part of any conversation, I think is at least noteworthy.
No, I think honestly, when it comes to his development, I think it's been fine.
I agree. I think he's right on track. I'm
right.
not
I
saying
don't
this in a
know.
negative connotation at all.
I don't know about like putting him on. Last year we were really high on him because of the OHL thing. You're right, and obviously I had a big bias towards him because I love the fact that this kid was doing what he was. But I think there's also the understanding that the AHL is a completely different beast. Professional hockey is a different beast, and he's an undersized center. He's 5'10", 165 pounds, according to Elite Prospects. That weight may have changed, but like there was going to be an adjustment. The AHL is a much more physical game, where the OHL is a lot more skill heavy. Not to say there's not skill in the AHL, but like you're playing with men now. And he's undersized in terms of NHL players at this day and age. So there was going to be an adjustment. And that being said, like he put up 26 points in 70 games. Yeah, he only scored 5 goals, but like you see the flashes. I don't think that I'm not like I didn't talk about him because I'm not shocked he's not in the top 10.
For sure.
But I think his path to the NHL is tougher.
Be in the top 10. That wasn't really my point. It was just like from year to year. I feel like he had a lot of hype last year. Maybe some wind is out of the sails. That's all.
Yeah, it is what it is. It's going to be an adjustment. I think next year's really when we're going to see if he has what it takes to make to the NHL. Well, after a full season AHL, he's going to need to bulk up and like learn how to outmuscle guys. But like you still see the flashes.
Get him on that Raymond diet.
Right, that Raymond diet.
Get him on that Razor diet. And then, like I said, this wasn't supposed to be like, oh, like he sucks now. Like this is again, like I actually think his development is fine. Like that's kind of normal for him to go from Flint to the AHL and not get a ton of playing time and a lot of like favorable deployments, be kind of in the bottom and whatnot. He's still very young. I'm sure he'll be fine, but just a guy who had all the hype in the world because of the numbers last year. So.
Yeah. We're going to head to a quick break when we return. I want to talk a little bit about what makes the Detroit Red Wings prospect pool number one and maybe a little bit of what they're missing as well, which would be hard to believe, right? They're number one. What could they be missing? Well, I still think that there's something. So stay tuned for that in segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, let's talk a little bit about what makes the Red Wings prospect pool number one in the NHL. And I think the biggest reason why they are number one in the NHL is solely because of the sheer amount of NHL caliber talent that they have in their prospect pool. Now, I don't say high-end NHL caliber talent, and I'll talk about that in a second. But when you look at this list, the top 10, and maybe even go 11 and 12, there's several guys, like through the first 5 players, I have no doubts they're going to be an NHL player at some point in their career. Trey Augustine, I have confidence that he'll make strides as well. He had an incredible first year with Michigan State. Obviously, before I jump the gun, I want to see what he can do at the professional level. I think he's running it back with Michigan State, but his first season was incredible. Mazer, I'm convinced he's an NHL lock already. It's just what's his ceiling. And then like the final 3, I think Boehm is on track, and then William Wallander and Buchnikov, I'm not so sure about because I need to see more out of 2 of those guys. But like, so that gives us 7 of 10 players in the top 10 where I'm like, this guy's going to make the NHL. Like, I think that is the biggest strength as to why the Red Wings prospect pool is the first number one in the NHL.
Yeah, I completely. And then again, we'll talk about the high end, like league wide talent here in a second. But in terms of why there is we talk all the time about floors and ceilings. It's one of my favorite conversations every August usually. But we're jumping the gun a little bit here. about the floors and ceilings of expectations for teams and players and whatnot, because like exact comparisons drive me nuts, like player comps and like team comps and stuff every year just drive me absolutely. Like, these are all individual people. These are all, like, each team is an individual entity. And so when talking about the ceilings and floors of this prospect pool, I feel like the floor for almost everybody in this 10 is like NHL caliber player. And I don't think, to your point, I completely agree with you, there's too many teams out there that can really look at that and be like, yeah, like, 7, 8, 9 of our top 10 here are like dang near guaranteed at worst, just like NHL talent, period. Whether that's third pair, bottom line, what have you, just our NHL caliber players down the road. And that, that high floor of a prospect pool, prospects are really hard to predict. And most of them have, the future's in front of you. We hope you're going to be really good. We're really excited. And then most of them don't end up being obviously like the best players in the NHL. That's why there's only a few of those, every generation draft, whatever you want to use there. So I think I agree with you, but I think that this pool specifically is just really full of guys that I think you're right are going to be, I mean, even in that top 5, like, dare you even say like solid NHL players, right? Like, yeah. Edvinsson, top 4 defensemen, Danielson and Kasper, what at worst middle 6, like at worst middle 6, Sandin Pellikka, top 4. I guess maybe at worst bottom 4, Kosa, like hopefully at worst again, like it's one of those things where the because they're hard to predict. And because so many people have such high expectations for so many, having guys that are just guaranteed NHL talent is going to boost your rating.
And now let's talk a little bit about what they might lack. And I think that there is something that this list lacks, and that's true blue chip prospects. The closest thing you have obviously on here is Simon Edvinsson at number 1. There could be an argument that he's a borderline blue chip prospect. But McKeen's, despite ranking the Detroit Red Wings as the first number 1 prospect pool in the NHL, none of these prospects are on their top 10 list in the NHL for prospects. And I'll pull that up for you guys here as well. Here you see McKeen's top 10 NHL prospects being Will Smith of the Sharks, Matvei Michkov of the Flyers, Brant Clark of the Kings, so on and so forth. Not one. Simon Edvinsson being the number 1 ranked player and prospect in the Red Wings system is not cracking the top 10. And I think that is what the Red Wings really lack. And I think part of that, I don't want to say it's by design, because you don't design to not take blue chip prospects, but we've talked about it right on our podcast with our guests, that Yzerman, in lieu of swinging for the fences on some guys, went for players who he viewed as safe, projectable NHL caliber talent. You could make the same argument about Marco Kasper, Nate Danielson. Both those guys project to be middle 6 as their floor, and like as their ceiling, probably second line. Like, they're very safe picks to play in the NHL, but he didn't swing for the fences. Like, there's plenty of guys on here, but Jasper Wellstedt we know for sure, right? Matthew Savoy. Like, there's a lot of guys on here that the Red Wings had an opportunity to swing for the fences on, but they opted to go with the safe route. So I think that may be what this list is still lacking. That all being said, right, like, this is still the best prospect pool in the NHL, and this is a fantastic list. I know we've spent 29 minutes now breaking down what we love and what we don't like about the list, but overall, like, it's splitting hairs, because any criticisms I have of this list are so minimal that it's really only worth bringing up for the purpose of content. Like, the fact that the Red Wings have that many projectable NHL level talents in their top 10 is going to be what's going to help them stay relevant and consistent, and also within the cap structure when their cup window opens. So I'm really overall pleased with how this has gone, how the Red Wings draft process has gone, what their prospect pool is like, and what their future holds. Anyways, I've rambled and gone onto a tangent. Scotty, I haven't even given you an opportunity to react to the top 10 in the NHL.
No, no. Well, I honestly, the first thing that jumps out of me is the Sharks are about to have the probably number 1 and 2 prospects in the NHL after draft night. But I think that I think there's a point to be made on, like some of these guys were on the board when the Wings had picks, but also like plenty of them weren't, right? Like if you look at that top 5, plenty of these guys weren't on the board when the Wings had picks as well in recent drafts, and we know the Wings lottery luck and whatnot. I don't know. I think also like top 10 in the NHL is like there's 32 teams, and these are that are full of prospects, and like the top single 10, like not having a top 10 prospect in the entire league doesn't really bother me much at all. I do agree with you that there's maybe not, again, like this is a number 1 pool because of the high floor of its nature, not because there's a ton of guys that have the ability to be like heart winners, right? Like there's
Right.
certainly a difference between those two things. And I think we've made that probably too clear at this point, but I don't know. Like if you expanded this to top, 50, top 30, the Wings are going to have a few guys in there. So like, I don't know, not having a bona fide like top 10 is just such a small amount. Like that doesn't really I'll take the quantity of and quality, like we have both obviously, but I'll take the amount of depth this organization has rather than, some of these franchises who maybe have a guy in the top 10 here, but not too much after that.
Well, and allow me to soften the blow a little bit of any salt people may have about Red Wings not having a top 10 prospect in the NHL, according to McKeen's, is that Brock Otten, who is the lead director of scouting for McKeen's Hockey, leaked the top 25 in the NHL, and sitting at number 11 was Simon Edvinsson, just on the outside looking in. Honorable mention number 1. And number 24 was Nate Danielson. So while the Red Wings don't have any prospects in the top 10, they do have 2 in the top 25. But again, what it comes back to is what makes the Red Wings the number 1 prospect pool in the NHL, and what makes this list by McKeen's so great. Because again, as much as we're splitting hairs throughout it, this is a fantastic list, and full credit to McKeen's for putting this together.
Read all of the articles and stuff, the breakdown. Magazine, everything, McKeen's is a really, really fun and great resource.
Yeah, so go check out their stuff. And again, it just comes down to like, Yzerman has done a great job of giving the Red Wings a lot of options at the NHL caliber level. And that is what it's like, the accumulation of overall talent, not having 1 or 2 high-level guys that has made them number 1 in the NHL, and what's going to keep them in that top 10 for probably a couple years, even while some of those prospects begin to trickle in, is that it's just a continuation of having developing guys that are going to have that NHL level floor.
For sure. Yeah, and we could talk a whole half hour again, about just the job that Yzerman has done in this side of things since taking over. Man, I mean, this was dang near an empty cabinet, and he came in and has now got us to a point where even if you don't like McKeen's, whatever, disagree with the list, etc., is pretty universally one of the better prospect pools in the entire NHL, and that is unbelievably exciting.
Correct. So with that being said, we're going to sign off there. Scotty, do you have any final thoughts?
I don't think so, man. I'm sorry for not being able to talk today. I feel like I was kind of all over the place. But
Me too.
Jeez, feels like a rough one. So I'm sorry if it was, but we ball.
We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow. We'll be joined by Sean Shapiro of Expected by Whom. So stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.